The rain came down like sheets of broken glass, battering the windshield with relentless fury. Luke gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles pale under the dim dashboard light. The wipers screeched back and forth, struggling to keep up. With the flood cascading over the glass, headlights cut jagged beams through the downpour, illuminating nothing but a wall of water and twisted trees. He leaned forward, eyes strained, trying to focus on the road that was rapidly vanishing under rising water. Each pothole felt deeper, each gust of wind stronger. He had driven in storms before, but this one felt different, dangrier, heavier, like the sky itself had a score to settle. And Luke, in his silence, wasn't sure he didn't deserve it. The radio hissed to life, static cutting through the cabin like nails. Flash flood warning, in effect to avoid low-lying roads near the bayou. Multiple gator sightings reported. Luke exhaled sharply, switching the dial lower but not off. The message still echoed in his mind. The gators didn't scare him much not anymore, but the idea of being trapped out here, in the middle of nowhere, with water rising and memories creeping in. That was something else. Mud splashed as his truck bumped along the road, the swamp licking closer to the tires with each mile. The wheel jerked slightly in his hands, pulling left from a rut, but Luke barely noticed. His thoughts were heavier than the truck. He had been good at his job. One's rescue coordinator, wildlife rehab specialist, the guy who showed up when no one else dared. Until the day he didn't show up in time. Until the mother bear died. Until he lost both the animal and himself. Now, he fixed fences and ignored phone calls. Exile disguised as work. Every mile away from the city was a step deeper into the silence he had chosen. Or maybe the silence had chosen him. Lightning split the sky then again, closer this time. In that fractured second of light, something moved. Just beyond the trees, down by the swollen river's edge. A dark shape, shaky, small, moving, but just barely. Luke blinked hard, unsure if it was real or imagined. A branch, an animal, a trick of his mind. The shape disappeared as the storm swallowed the light again, but something about it lingered too fragile, too wrong to ignore. His foot eased off the gas. The tires hissed to a halt against the flooded gravel shoulder. Wipers still clawed at the windshield. The engine idled like a heartbeat, holding its breath. He stared at the spot where the figure had been, but there was only darkness now. His mind whispered, "Don't do this again." But his gut said, "Go." Before his brain could say no, his hands had already moved. Flashlight, raincoat, door. His boots hit the ground with a wet thud, instantly sinking into the thick mud. The rain slapped his face like cold warnings, but he kept walking toward the trees, toward the river, toward the maybe something he hoped was real. His heart pounded, louder than the thunder, and somehow it felt like it was waking up, each step. Deeper into the woods felt like peeling back time. He wasn't sure what he was looking for. Maybe a deer, maybe a ghost, maybe something else. But the feeling was unmistakable. That strange, ancient pull in his chest, the one he hadn't felt since the day everything broke. He was walking toward a rescue. He just didn't know yet. He was the one about to be saved. The rain didn't fall, it attacked. Sheets of cold water slammed down from the sky, as if the heavens were trying to drown the forest below. Thunder cracked with violent finality, echoing across the soaked valley. Every step Luke took was a battle. His boots sank into the mud like anchors, sucking and slipping with each stride. Branches whipped at his face, and the storm roared louder than anything in his head. But inside, his mind was silent. He moved like a man sleepwalking through chaos, drawn by something he couldn't name, a feeling, a pull in his chest. The flashlight in his hand flickered, nearly drowned by the torrent, but he kept moving. Left foot, right foot, don't stop, then. Through the thick veil of rain, he saw it. It was a blur at first, just motion, a splash of brown and black near the riverbank. But then the light caught the shape, and Luke stopped dead. A dog, a German shepherd, soaked to the bone, caked in mud, one paw twisted unnaturally beneath a tangle of exposed roots. She thrashed weakly, her legs kicking at the water but gaining no ground. Panic radiated from her, but she made no sound, no barking, no whining. Just silent, desperate struggling. Luke's heart slammed in his chest. The river was high, swollen from the storm. Water licked the dog's belly, rising fast. The roots that trapped her offered no give, and on her side, 2 faint red streaks told him she'd been trying to free herself for too long. She wasn't, just stuck. She was running out of time. Then he saw them. Just beyond the bend, silent, still waiting. Alligators, 3 of them. Heads like drifting logs, eyes glowing faintly above the black water. The current masked their movements, but Luke had lived around these parts long enough to know what he was seeing. Predators, patient, calculating. They'd been watching her, maybe for hours, maybe longer. A fresh spike of adrenaline surged through him. His hand tightened around the flashlight, but it felt useless. Now a toy against monsters. He took a half step forward, his boots slipping on slick rocks near the waterline. "No," he whispered, breath fogging. No, no, no. He couldn't let this happen. Not again. The storm disappeared, replaced by another night, years ago. Another downpour. Another scream. A different set of eyes. A child, this time, 8 years old, trapped beneath the collapsed timber of a barn after the flood. Luke had been the first responder on scene. First in, last out. Except he hadn't gotten her out. He could still see her hand reaching toward him, still feel the heat of the fire that took the rest. The smell of wet ash and burnt wood haunted him. Her name had stayed lodged behind his ribs ever since. A permanent scar he never spoke of. He'd frozen back then. Too late, too slow, and now here he was, again, water rising, a life hanging by a thread. The shepherd had stopped thrashing. Now she just stared, eyes locked onto his steady, silent, unwavering. There was no panic in her gaze anymore, no fear, just something raw and old. Trust, like she already knew he wouldn't turn away, like she believed in him more than he did. The storm raged. The river boiled, but Luke stood still, held by that look. A breath caught in his throat. Something inside him cracked. "All right," he whispered, tossing the flashlight aside. "All right, girl, I'm coming." The plunge into the river felt like hitting a wall of ice. The current gripped him instantly, ripping at his clothes, dragging him sideways. He kicked hard, arms slicing through the water, eyes locked on the shepherd. Behind him, a ripple to his left movement. The gators had noticed. They were shifting, closing in. Time was no longer measured in seconds, but in heartbeats. He reached her. She didn't move, didn't flinch, as he wrapped one arm around her ribs and reached for the roots with the other. They were tangled deep, gnarled and tight, cutting into her flesh. He couldn't see, clearly, just feel. His fingers found the paw and pulled. His breath came in gasps. The roots refused to give, then snapped all at once. The shepherd yelped as her leg came free, but she didn't struggle. She clung to him, front paws clambering against his chest as he turned. Behind them, a swell of water, something large, fast, dots, teeth. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. They made it. Somehow, through the pull of the river and the promise of death behind them, they made it. Luke collapsed first, boots hitting the soft mud of the far shore. Then the shepherd followed, limping beside him, soaked and shivering. They lay there, side by side, both of them panting, both of them alive. The rain didn't stop, but it no longer mattered. Luke's flannel overshirt came off, damp but still warm. He wrapped it around the dog, who didn't resist. She leaned into him, her head resting against his thigh. His hands trembled not from cold, but from something deeper. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. Relief, gratitude, hope. He looked down at Hurt, those same eyes that had held him. Steady in the storm, and felt it fully. The shift, the crack inside him, now open, healing. He didn't know. Her name, didn't know where she came from. But he knew this, he wasn't letting her go. Not now, not ever. The cabin door creaked shut behind him as Luke bent low, cradling the limp German shepherd in his arms, like something fragile and long forgotten. The smell of wet fur, old pine, and blood filled the one-room cabin, mingling with the low hiss of the fire. He laid her down gently on an old wool blanket by the hearth, her breath shallow but steady. His hands moved quickly, not with panic but practiced care goes, warm water, tweezers. The wound on her leg was deeper than he'd first thought. She didn't whimper, not once, even as he cleaned the dried blood and grit away. Only her eyes moved, tracking him, unblinking. Luke didn't speak, not yet. The silence between them felt sacred. For now, she was a stranger, half wild and half broken. But she'd let him carry her. And that was something as he reached to rewrap the gauze. His fingers brushed against her collar of leather, cracked with age. Something clinked softly, a metal tag, dulled and bent. He turned it over, expecting a name, a phone number, something, to anchor her to someone. Instead, there was only a number, 4982, no name, no ID, just 4 digits, barely etched, almost lost in the corrosion. Luke frowned, tracing the numbers with his thumb. Military tag, rescue chip code. It told him nothing except that someone had once claimed her, and now she was here, in his cabin, in his care. The mystery settled into the room like dust. But Luke didn't press. Some stories took time to surface. For now, she needed rest. He slipped the collar off and set it gently on the nearby table. The next morning, Luke expected her to be gone. He opened the door to let the dawn in, half ready to see only paw prints, disappearing into the frost. But she stayed. She didn't bolt when he knelt beside her again. She didn't flinch as he unwrapped the bandage. Her muscles tensed just a little but then relaxed. She watched him, eyes steady, as he cleaned the wound a second time, his hands careful and sure. Trust wasn't spoken here. It was in the stillness, in the way she didn't run. When he was done, she lowered her head onto her paws with a soft sigh. The kind that said, "I'll stay a little longer." Luke sat on the floor beside her for a while, his back against the wall. Unsure who was healing whom, days began to blend. Mornings started with 2 tin bowls coffee for him, broth for her. He'd speak occasionally, soft words about the weather or the woodpile, but mostly it was silent. The dog still nameless for him outside, limping less with each passing day. They walked the tree line slowly. her nose low to the ground, his eyes scanning the horizon. Always together, never more than a few steps apart in the evenings. She lay by the fire, her chest rising and falling in rhythm with the flames. Luke sat near the window, carving pieces of old driftwood, occasionally glancing over at her. There was no leash, no command, but she stayed, and slowly, the quiet between them began to feel less like absence and more like understanding. The name came to him one morning, unplanned. He was chopping wood when she limped out of the cabin and sat nearby, watching him with those same quiet eyes. The river shimmered behind her, silver under the early sun, the same one he'd found her beside. Battered and barely conscious. "River," he said aloud, more to himself than to her. She turned her head, ears twitching. He smiled. "Yeah, that fits." River wagged her tail once, just once. But it was enough. From that moment, she wasn't just the dog he'd rescued. She was River, survivor, companion. The silence between them had a name now. Luke began to talk more. At first, only while making coffee or mending his boots. But then the words came unprompted, and River always listened. "I used to work in rescue, wilderness search, saved a lot of people," he murmured one night, watching the firelight dance. In her eyes, he paused, "until the day I didn't." River didn't flinch or look away, just lay there, still and warm and present. "It was a kid," he whispered, jaw tight. "Mountain storm, we were too late. I stopped after that." The pain he carried didn't pour out, it leaked slowly. Over days and evenings, River never barked, never moved, but something in her stillness comforted him. He'd saved her from the river, but she was saving him too, one unjudging silence at a time. It was dusk when River growled, low, deep, her body tense like a drawn bow. Luke froze. Her gaze was locked on something outside the window near the porch tot. He stepped carefully, peered out hand, saw it, coiled near the steps. A rattlesnake, sun-warmed and silent. "Jesus," he muttered. If she hadn't growled, he backed away, heart pounding, then grabbed a long-handled shovel from the corner. The snake was gone when he returned, slithered back into the grass, maybe. But the threat had been real. River was still at the window, tail still, body alert. He walked over and knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Good girl," he whispered. "Real good girl." The next warning wasn't a growl. It was 3 a.m. when River's sharp bark shattered the stillness. Luke jolted awake, heart racing. Another bark urgent. She was already at the door. He grabbed his flashlight and followed her outside, the cold biting through his shirt. River darted toward the shed, barking louder, and then he saw its mouth, thin, rising from the far side of the shed where the generator sat. "Damn," he breathed. He sprinted, yanked the generator cables loose, and beat the smoldering leaves with his coat. A fire just beginning to whisper into flame. Minutes later, breathless, he dropped to his knees beside River. "You saw it first," he said, voice shaking. "You saw it before I did." She pressed her head against his shoulder. River curled beside the cabin door again that night, eyes open, watching the wind move through the trees. Luke sat across from her, sipping black coffee and studying her silhouette. He realized then it wasn't just about rescuing her. She was watching over him, standing sentinel in a world he'd long stopped trusting. She didn't ask for praise, didn't need a leash. She was just there, always. He smiled faintly, lifting his mug in a quiet salute. Guess I'm not alone out here anymore. And for the first time in years, the thought brought him peace. It had rained the night before, and the ground still held its memory. Luke noticed the tracks the moment he stepped onto the back trail deep. Grooves in the mud that didn't match his own truck tires. Too narrow. Too new, he crouched, brushing a hand over the print. Fresh, maybe a few hours old, River stood beside him, her body alert, nose twitching. He scanned the tree line, tension curling in his gut. No sound, no birdsong, just the whisper of wind. Someone had been here, and it wasn't the first time. River was already growling when Luke stepped into the main room. Her eyes locked on the window, her body coiled, low and still. He followed her gaze and there it was, a black SUV, creeping slowly down the back road. Same make, same model, same tinted windows. Luke's chest tightened. He hadn't seen that vehicle since the week he found River. He reached for his rifle, not out of panic, but preparation. River stood by the door now, unmoving. Ready, looks like our quiet's over, Luke murmured, but this time he wasn't facing it alone. Luke's breath hitched in the stillness of the cabin. The night had fallen thick and heavy, the silence broken only by the soft creak of wood settling. But then a low, guttural growl sliced through the quiet. River, usually calm and watchful, paced restlessly near the window, his muscles taut, eyes fixed on the shadowed trees beyond. Luke's pulse quickened as he sat upright, heart pounding in his chest. Outside, faint tire tracks shimmered in the pale moonlight, glistening wet on the dirt path. Something was coming, something unwelcome. River's growl deepened, a warning that chilled Luke more than the cold night air. Danger was creeping closer. Hidden by thick underbrush, Luke crouched, River's body pressed close to his side. Two men emerged silently from an SUV parked a short distance away. Their flashlights cut harsh beams through the darkness, sweeping the damp forest floor, their voices low but edged with menace. "We're here for the dog," one whispered, eyes scanning for any sign of movement. The boss said no mistakes this time. "Get him quietly," the other replied, gripping something cold and metallic in his hand. Luke swallowed hard, gripping River's collar. The weight of the threat pressed down like the dense night fog. They were not just strangers. These men were hunters, and River was their prey. In the sudden flash of memory, Luke saw it all again. River, in a cold, harsh kennel, surrounded by metal bars and whispered threats. Trained in silence and speed for a deadly purpose, River was once a prized asset in an illegal drug smuggling ring, conditioned to obey without question. His every instinct sharpened for evasion and escape. But during a fierce police raid, chaos erupted. River broke free, running through the dark alleys and backwoods, escaping chains and cruelty alike. That past, buried beneath years of healing, now came crashing back, threatening to consume the fragile peace they had built together. River's muscles coiled, eyes blazing with determination. Without a sound, he slipped from Luke's side and disappeared into the shadows of the trees. The men froze, startled by the sudden movement. Luke's breath caught as River darted forward, a bold gambit to lure the danger away from the cabin, their sanctuary. Every step River took was a sacrifice, a desperate gamble to protect the man who had saved him, even if it meant facing the hunters alone, heart racing. Luke moved to the corner where his old tactical gear was stored: swamp boots, a weathered vest, a worn combat knife. Memories flooded back, covert missions, narrow escapes. and the steady rhythm of survival. He tightened the straps, feeling the weight of those old battles settle on his shoulders once more. This night was no different. The past he had tried to leave behind was calling him back, demanding he rise to protect the dog who had become his family. Silent as a shadow, Luke slipped into the tangled wetlands, every step careful and deliberate. His knowledge of the forest, the hidden trails, the snapping twigs, the low-hanging branches became his greatest weapon. He moved with the hunter's patience, anticipating the men's progress as they searched blindly for River. The forest was no longer just a backdrop. It was a living maze, one that Luke would use to turn the tide. At the edge of the old riverbank, where the first moment of their meeting still echoed in Luke's mind, River's breaths came quick and shallow. The men's flashlights swept across the clearing, blinding him. Fear flickered in his eyes as one of the men stepped forward, raising a weapon, a cold, unforgiving reminder of the dangers still hunting him. River froze, instincts battling panic. This was the moment where everything could be lost. Adrenaline surged like wildfire through Luke's veins. From the brush, he sprang forward, crashing into the nearest attacker with the force of years of training and desperate love. The man stumbled, weapon firing a deafening crack, but it was too late. Luke's body shielded River, his own heart pounding louder than the gunshot. The second man lunged, but River was ready. Teeth flashed in the dim light, clamping down hard on the attacker's arm. The bite was fierce. Fearless a protector, refusing to surrender the man who had given him a second chance. The man screamed, stumbling back as River held fast, the unshakable loyalty between them blazing brighter than any fear. Bloodied and exhausted, Luke crouched beside River, who now lay panting but unbroken. The fight was over for now. Luke pulled out his phone with trembling hands and dialed a number from a past life, a trusted contact in the Wildlife Authority, someone who could bring help. His voice was steady despite the chaos, a lifeline thrown into the darkness, signaling that their fight was far from over, but they had hoped within hours. Officers arrived, sweeping the forest and following Luke's tip. The men were caught, arrested for their crimes, their dark world unraveling at last. River's story, once hidden, once silenced, was finally exposed. The past could no longer haunt them in the shadows. As Luke watched River's tired eyes meet his, he knew their bond was stronger than ever, a testament to survival, love, and the unbreakable trust between a man and his dog. Luke sat at the worn wooden table inside the small office, the weight of the moment pressing down on him like a storm long awaited. His fingers gripped the pen tightly, the paper beneath catching the slight tremor in his hand. But this was not the trembling of dread or uncertainty, was something new, a fragile hope mixed with a trace of disbelief. For years he had locked away pieces of himself, afraid to let anyone in, haunted by memories he thought he'd never escape. Yet here he was, officially bringing River into his life, not as a temporary protector or a companion for convenience, but as family. Each signature on the adoption form was a quiet vow, a step toward healing, a silent promise to never let go. Again, Luke's breath caught as the final line met the paper. He dared to imagine a future where love and loyalty would no longer be shadows lurking behind the past, but the very light guiding his way. The room fell silent except for the soft click of the pen resting on the desk. The adoption officer looked up, eyes kind yet steady. "He's yours now," she said simply, a statement heavier than any words Luke had heard in a long time. Those 3 words sent a rush of emotion through him: relief, gratitude, and a sudden, unexpected swell of tears threatening to spill. Luke swallowed hard, blinking fiercely to keep them at bay. It wasn't weakness. It was the release of a burden he hadn't known he carried. River was no longer a stray shadow from the past or a guardian in the dark. River was home. The gravity of that truth settled in his chest, anchoring him, reminding him that this bond, this friendship born from hardship, was now his anchor in the world. For the first time in years, Luke felt whole, outside. Sunlight spilled over the cabin yard, warming the earth and the worn boards of the old fence. River burst forward like a flash of joy, muscles rippling beneath his glossy coat as he raced. Through the grass, tongue lolling, eyes bright with freedom. Luke's hands worked methodically, hammer striking nail with steady rhythm. Each repair a quiet act of rebuilding, not just of the fence, but of his life. He paused for a moment, watching River chase a stray leaf swirling in the breeze, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. This was no longer a place to merely survive the ghosts of the past. This was home, a sanctuary where trust grew with every shared look and every silent step. The bond between them had transformed into something deeper rooted in love, comfort, and the promise of tomorrow. Luke's heart, long guarded, beat with a steady calm. Here, in the warmth of routine and the light of new beginnings, they were living again. One afternoon, a letter slipped through the cabin's mailbox, its envelope creased but official. Luke unfolded it with cautious fingers, eyes scanning the words that felt like a lifeline thrown across time. He had been reinstated as a part-time volunteer with the Wildlife Authority. The world he thought he'd left behind was welcoming him back. His pulse quickened, but not with anxiety. This was a signal that the healing River had helped him find was not invisible to the world. River's sharp bark cut through the quiet as he nudged Luke's hand with his nose, eyes sparkling with something close to understanding. They were a team once more, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The path Luke had feared to walk was opening before him again, and this time he wouldn't walk it alone. The forest welcomed them with open arms, leaves whispering secrets as the two moved side by side along the familiar path. River's pace was steady, leading with confident steps toward the high cliff where everything had started, the place where fear met hope, where trust had first blossomed between man and dog. Luke's gaze followed River's form, his heart swelling with gratitude. Each step was a thread weaving their story tighter, binding wounds with memories of hardship and triumph. When they reached the cliff's edge, the world stretched out before them, a vast, endless canvas of possibilities. The wind tugged gently at their faces, carrying away the last shadows of the past. They sat together in quiet companionship, two souls stitched together by trials endured and love earned. No words were needed. The journey had come full circle, and in that silence, Luke found peace. Time slowed. Luke and River sat side by side, the breeze soft against their skin and fur, carrying a quiet promise of forever. At that moment, words felt unnecessary. Their hearts beat in unison, steady, strong, healed. The long nights of fear, the battles fought in shadow, the fragile hope that had grown into unwavering trust, all had led them here. Two souls, once broken, now whole. Luke reached out, his hand resting gently on River's back, feeling the steady warmth beneath his palm. In the stillness, an unspoken truth settled between them. They had saved each other, and nothing could ever break the bond they shared. The evening sky was quiet, soft hues melting into darkness, but inside Luke's cabin, An even softer truth lingered, one neither of them had spoken aloud. Both man and dog carried their scars, wounds invisible but deeply felt. Luke's life had splintered into fragments after the accident, the loss, the silence, the numbness. River, once a tool forged for violence, carried the echoes of a harsh, discarded existence. Yet, in their quiet companionship, something began to mend. It wasn't perfection or forgetting the pain. It was the gentle weaving of broken pieces into something whole again. Luke reached out with trembling hands, not just to care for River, but to let himself be cared for. And in that mutual reaching, healing quietly bloomed. River's past was a dark shadow programmed for aggression, stripped of kindness, cast away when no longer useful. His eyes held the weight of countless battles fought in silence, the sharp edge of a life that never asked for softness, but love simple, unwavering. Love changed that. Luke's gentle voice, the slow offer of trust, the steady hand that never hurt, gave River a new purpose. No longer a weapon, no longer alone. River found himself protector of something precious, Luke's fragile hope, their shared sanctuary. In this unexpected bond, River learned that strength could be gentle, and loyalty could be more than obedience, could be love. When Luke plunged into the icy current, teeth clenched against the cold, it was more than just an act of bravery. It was a leap back into life, breaking free from the prison of his own fears. He didn't see it then, how that desperate rescue would pull him from the depths of his own despair. The water stung, the river roared, but beneath it all was a stirring something, ancient and vital awakening inside him. That moment was a silent promise, to face danger, to risk pain, and to open his heart again. In saving River, Luke unknowingly saved the part of himself that had long been lost. Their bond was slow, deliberate, forged in the quiet hours of shared hardship and small triumphs. Trust crept in on careful pause, tentative glances, and the softest nudge of a nose against a wary hand. For Luke, learning to trust River meant risking disappointment, fear, and pain. For River, trusting Luke meant lowering his guard, allowing himself to be vulnerable for the first time. But with each hard-earned step, that fragile trust became a lifeline. It transformed them both, lifting them out of isolation, teaching them what loyalty truly means. Not just obedience, but unwavering presence, fierce protection, and unconditional love. As they sat side by side on that final quiet trail, the wind whispering round them, the truth was clear. Sometimes the greatest act of saving is the one that finds us in return. Luke had dived into that river to save a dog, but what he found was a way back to himself. River had found a home not just in a cabin or a yard, but in a heart willing to heal alongside him. Their journey wasn't just about survival, it was about rediscovery, hope, and the extraordinary power of a bond that rescues two broken souls at once.